5, 4. I think that was a fly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey guys, here it is.
Hey.
James Powell and Jason Jensen with the Crazy Double J's podcast. I guess you could say season 2, episode 1. So this is our very first monthly podcast.
Woo-hoo.
How about that? That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I'm pretty stoked about that. So, wow, it's been a number, probably a month since we did our little mini series, right? And
Yeah.
I have been absolutely slammed with work, and it's just been nuts. But it's also been super, super hot out here in the garage. I mean, right now, as we speak, it's 104 degrees where I'm sitting.
That's insane.
104 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
It's like soul crushing. I mean, like I've been working on the layout. I've been working on the track, hand laying all my HON30 track, right? So I got a friend, Tim Morris. He owns a company called Fast Tracks, right?
Okay.
And so I ordered a bunch of like jigs and fixtures and stuff from him to specifically to hand lay track. I've hand laid a bunch of like regular track, right? Straight track, stuff like that, but I've never hand laid turnouts before. And it seems very daunting. You look at a turnout and you go, holy crap, that's really, really complicated.
Yeah.
But
Now, do you worry about the temperature change, like come this winter?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have some expansion joints, right?
Okay.
I made sure to leave expansion joints. I've decided I'm going to do DCC with dead rail, right?
Okay.
So I have a dog bone loop at the end of the track. I made it all so it could have blocks, if I had to wire up blocks, because you're reversing the polarity in dog bone, right? A reverse loop is what I put in the end of the track. Right.
Okay. So it's not a dog bone.
You're
it's
like,
just
it's a reverse loop. What are you talking about, dog bone? No, it's not a dog bone. It's a reverse loop.
okay.
Right?
Okay.
So obviously you got to put blocks in there, and you have to have some kind of special controller. But what I did was I put all the blocks in, but I'm going to use dead rail. I think that will be really cool. So it's going to be 12-volt battery operated, right? The locomotives will have batteries in them.
Wow.
And but it's also going to be DCC controlled. So we'll be able to run DCC on the, 1 or 2 locomotives I have, but I'm not going to have to worry about cleaning the track all the time. Right.
Okay.
So I got to take a drink of water here because, it's 104.
Man.
So, ooh, ice cold. That's refreshing. It's I'm always crying about how hot it is in the garage, but whatever, it is what it is. It's just early this year is what's weird. Usually it's not in June. It's hot in June, but it's 100 plus every day for all of June. That doesn't.
It was super hot in Colorado for a while, but now the temperature's cooled down and it's pretty nice.
They had 112 or 114 in Portland.
That's insane.
Seattle, it was 100 plus in British Columbia. I mean, that's crazy. They're not used to that. Their streets were buckling, right? I saw pictures of all these like streets that were just like the asphalt was popping. It's just nuts. But that leads back into the whole track thing. What do you do when you lay track? Everything's hot. All the rails expanded, right? Yep. And then it cools down and all the rails going to contract. What's going to happen? Well, luckily, I'm laying it when it's hot. So the rail can contract. So I have very, very small gaps all over the place. And so when those gaps do open up, when it cools down, they'll open up slightly, but it's not like where if you don't put gaps and it gets hot and you lay track when it's cold and then it gets hot, your rail will buckle.
And with your battery powered engines, I don't think you're going to have a problem.
No. Yeah. And that's the cool thing is that, you're going to have, there's constant 12 volt. And remember, these are N scale chassis because it's HON30. We're not running HO or bigger where you might need a higher voltage. So we're running these little N scale locomotives with HO scale, basically shells on them for all intents and purposes. But So I don't have to worry about dirt, and I don't have to worry just wiring. I ran all the block wires and everything just in case, right?
Yeah.
Really, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set it up where I have a spur, and that spur is powered, so it's going to have clean track. That's actually going to charge the battery, so I can park the locomotive there.
Wow.
But the battery charger hooked up to it. It's going to charge the battery.
Yeah.
It's like the fueling station, right? It's like the diesel terminal or
Man.
the cooling
Now,
terminal. And
have you done this on a previous layout?
heck no, never done it.
Okay.
It's a new thing, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard of people running, outdoor layouts with batteries and stuff like that, but I've never done any dead rail stuff. It's just really starting to get popular.
Huh. That's great.
I heard about it on one of the first things I heard about was on that Dazzy J's podcast out of Australia, and he's really interested in it. And I think that it's going to be fun. I can't wait. I don't have to worry about cleaning track. And
that kind of leads us into our discussion tonight about progressing as modelers.
Yeah, exactly.
And trying new things, and so
right. I mean. Yeah, and that's what we want to talk about tonight is, from where we started as modelers, we've both been doing it for a long time, but how that progresses and how you grow as a modeler. So I started because I liked trains. I inherited you could say it was a train set, but it was a little bit more robust than a train set. It was bigger. It was a big ping pong table. There was a little bit of thought put into it. It was more permanent, right? But
now this was when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was 6. So so my brother passed away, and so I got his stuff, and I always wanted to play with it. I was too little, and eventually I got a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and my brothers put stuff on it, and and then I had it down in the basement. And then as I got older, I played with it more and more. And then we started to add to it. Yeah. And it became, this is cool. We added another 4x8 but then we started watching the model railroader videos. And it was like, okay, it can be so much more than a piece of plywood in your basement. Right.
Yeah.
And then of course I saw the absolute amazing artistry of Malcolm Furlow, and it's all over since then. I mean,
exactly.
That started it all. So,
it's kind of the same for me. My grandfather got me into the hobby, and again started with a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and then doubled it, put them end to end. So now we had 4x16, and we just kept adding, and it was all just plastic kits. We weren't painting anything. We were just putting stuff together and running trains and really just having fun. Didn't care. We're just running any trains that we had or trains that we bought. We didn't care what year it was. Right. We were just having fun with the hobby.
Well, I thought, I had a buddy that lived a couple blocks away, and him and I was a dorky kid. He was more one of the jock type kids. Right. And, but he found out somehow that I had trains, and I don't remember how, because it wasn't something I talked about, but it was early, maybe like 5th grade, 6th grade. And he was like, hey, I really dig, I have one of my dad's friends has a train set. I think he called it a model railroad. And I don't think I had ever even heard of that term. Right. Yeah. And so he's like, do you have any set up? Do you have a set? And I said, yeah. So he came down to the basement and saw it, and he was like, oh man, this is really cool. Cause he didn't have anything, he was really into N scale, but he didn't have anything. I think his dad had bought him like a couple little, locomotives and things like that. Yep. And he's like, we should, my family, they just tore down their wooden fence. We should take some of that wood and we should make a more of a railroad type thing. Well, I think that was like 5th grade, and that ended in a dismal failure. Yeah. But a little bit later on, he had a subscription to Model Railroader magazine. Okay. And so then, hey, let's check that out. So I was checking it out, and I was like, maybe we could approach this a little bit differently and actually build like somewhat realistic bench work and what. So we did. And that's how we started. So that was my buddy Chad and myself. So it was cool because I had a friend, that was my age that we could. He started building an N-scale layout at his house in his garage, and then we were building my HO layout in my basement. So that was cool. So, and it really got it. And my mom was very supportive. We just started, she said, hey, I'll buy the lumber, but you're going to have to build it. So here I am in 6th grade, like, I can't even imagine my daughters who are older than that now in 6th grade building a layout, but we did. So, yeah. So that evolved, and I got more and more interested in it. So of course, then we were taking, like you said, you were building plastic kits.
Yep.
Well, I had a number of plastic kits, and I saw what they were doing in these videos in the magazines. I said, I want to be able to do something like that. So we started as simple as I had some old, I don't know who made them. They were Bachman or Model Power or something, Tyco, old Amtrak rib side passenger cars, like like where they all the railroads had all those streamlined passenger cars with what I did was I thought, hey, if I take some aluminum foil and cut little pieces and I rub it on the side of these cars, I'll have something that looks like corrugated metal. Right.
Yeah.
Because I was watching, I think Malcolm Furlow he was buying like Campbell's corrugated metal or something like that. And I didn't have any money. Right. So I said, well, let's try aluminum foil. So I cut all these like scale pieces of aluminum foil, and I had this plastic station, and I started gluing these little corrugated pieces onto the roof. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. So I was painting them rust color. And then the dock was like just like an injection molded flat plastic, and it was shiny. And I said, well, if I take some wood, so I think my mom we had like a bunch of popsicle sticks or something like that. So I actually cut them with the X-Acto knife, and cut them into like little scale boards, and made the deck of the loading dock.
Yeah.
And then I washed it. So it actually looked, for a 6th grader, it probably looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so then we got a couple little more plastic kits, and I kind of started kit bashing things and buying like balsa wood sheets and like scratch building stuff.
Yep.
And once I started doing that, I was like, I don't really want little kits. I want to make my own thing. So
I was starting to do the same, where I was building things, but looking back, it was probably way out of scale. It was probably way too big.
No, I guarantee.
Yeah.
we had a hobby shop that was once again, sorry, I'm crunching my ice, but it's hot. Hey, we had a hobby shop that was probably about 30 miles from us. And, that every once in a while, my mom or his parents would take us there. And so that was a real treat. So I was able to get things like a scale rule. They all had the Athearn blue box cars or the Roundhouse blue box. So we bought those. And back then the cars were like $4, $3.75, whatever.
Yeah.
And you every once in a while you find older ones that were like $2.75, and that was cool because we were at the time, like mowing lawns and stuff. We'd make like $20 here, so we could actually afford some of that stuff. Like our parents would buy our locomotives, which were Athearn locomotives at the time were like $25. So now they're like $250, right?
Yeah, right.
So we were able to advance it. It was somewhat affordable. I think that's one of the things now in the hobby is a lot of the stuff is, if you're younger, ready to run cars, $30, $40 for a piece of rolling stock, locomotives, anything that's even relatively decent is, hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
That's one issue, even though we keep talking about, it seems like the hobby is growing. I think that's kind of a barrier,
oh, sure. For young people. Yeah. But
now you had your grandpa.
Yeah.
So did he kind of bought whatever?
Yeah, he was buying everything and just sort of teaching me and showing me the ropes. But isn't it funny that you have to put in that time to get to where we're at now?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Because you figure out what it is you love building.
Right.
And it changes as you progress.
Yep.
Take George Celios. I mean, when he first started his layout, early interviews or articles that were written, he talked about John Allen being a huge influence. And he was planning to do floor to ceiling scenery work.
Yep. He was emulating, basically doing what John Allen did. Well, I mean, if you're going to have a hero in model that's a pretty good one to have, right? You know, when people are just breaking every kind of barrier, you know, and we talked about this before, but they're so we look back at John Allen stuff and go, yeah, it looks like it's, you know, it's good, but it's older. But man, he was doing things that nobody was doing. And that's pretty amazing.
Well, I think the more George modeled, the more he fell in love with structure building, and he just sort of went in a little different direction.
Well, he's done that even, you know, with the layout. So he went from so he didn't really do the floor to ceiling mountains, but he was doing kind of the bench work to ceiling buildings and the big concrete kind of jungles and massive skyscrapers. And then he's moved away from that to doing all the wood structures and bringing everything smaller, but much more. There's probably a lot more craftsmanship. The detail is a lot higher. You look at the stuff he's doing now, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So I mean,
but you don't know until you put in those hours.
No, you don't.
That's the key.
No, you'd look at, and I really wish Malcolm Furlow would have kind of continued. He's had these kind of little bumps where he pops in the scene and jumps out and pops back in. And, you know, he went from the big floor to ceiling, Colorado narrow gauge, which is, I absolutely love. And then he did some, you know, industrial kind of layout stuff, but it was really cool because he was always using accessible kits like Tyco and stuff like that were at the time really easy to find and really cheap, but he was making them look really good. He really never got to the point where he was doing a lot of like the Craftsman type kits, because those they were around, but it was early Craftsman kits. We never got to the mid 80s and beyond. He didn't do a lot of modeling, but what he did do in the 90s, late 90s, was early 2000s, was he was really starting to put a lot of heavy caricature in it stuff, and it was pretty amazing. And the last couple articles he did that I am aware of were in Narrow Gauge and Short Line Gazette, but he was really taking what had been kind of a craft model railroad, and because he is a fine artist, he was really kind of bringing in fine art.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Model railroading.
And I think his modeling was more like set design.
It really was.
Like he really didn't model the back of structures. I mean, he just modeled what the viewers saw.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I got one behind me right here. Of course, I got to hit my microphone. All right, so, you know, and that's really what, you know, so we got this, right?
Yeah.
But of course, the back, there's nothing on the back. Now this is going up against a wall, and I have to put in window glass. And actually, I just changed the color of this building because it was yellow, and I just painted it red. I couldn't stand the yellow; it was driving me crazy. This is my Darrell Huffman building, which was called Rebuilt Boats, but there I go again. It was called Rebuilt Boats, but now I crossed it out and hand painted.
That's awesome.
Used over top of it, so now it's
very cool.
But you know, things like that even evolve as you're a model builder. You know, I have some buildings for the layout now that I am now finding out I'm going to have to cut up. Right? They're too big for the space.
Okay.
I laid them out before I put the track down, and it looked awesome. It looked like it was going to be perfect. And now I got the track down. And I go, crap, this isn't going to fit. Now I got to cut this thing up. So, you know, we all evolve not only in the short term, cutting up a building maybe that doesn't fit, but then you also find out what you really enjoy. You know, you've done it. You're on your third layout, right?
Yeah, my third layout.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have went from, you were doing, it was very mountains.
Well, I had a layout that had like a lot of mountains, wood trestles, heavy scenery,
right?
You know, and it just left very little room for structures.
Sure.
And that's what I found that I truly love is building structures. So I needed to start over.
Right. So now you're all structures.
But I wouldn't have gotten to that point if I wouldn't have gone through that.
Sure.
So,
One thing I really like, which I'm seeing more of, is people taking model railroading and putting their own twist on it.
Oh yeah.
So it's not just, there's so many of us that, we really emulate Celios or just about anybody, where the Dave Frary or, there's so many guys out there, Malcolm Furlow or whoever. But all those guys have their kind of own unique perspective, right?
Yep.
And their kind of twists. A lot of people I see are wanting to look for the story in their model railroading.
Yep.
Or
well, they're being more original. I think.
I think so too.
More and more original modelers are starting to pop up.
Yeah. I mean, now, admittedly, a lot of the craftsman kit builders, a lot of the wood type kit manufacturers, not builders but manufacturers, they kind of tend to steer towards the East Coast, kind of the George Celios type of stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of people model that because that's what's available. If you're not a scratch builder, if you're not insanely creative, what's out there is fantastic. And if you build that and you build it somewhat close to the way the kit is, it's going to be like an East Coast thing because that's what's out there.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of like a Jake Johnson, Dave Meek type of, let's say, desert West Coast kind of look. There are. I mean, out here in California, there's a lot of modelers that do California, that model California.
Yep.
There's not a lot of manufacturers making that stuff.
No, there's not a lot of Southwest models, really.
No. And I mean, let's face it, the Northeast has always been where all the railroads are. From Boston to Chicago, that's where all the huge concentration was. Not so much out here. Out here, it's more like scenic vistas.
Yeah.
Big long stretches of track. The famous passes like Cajon or Tehachapi, that type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So there's a kind of juxtaposition there of the two different styles, but I think, and I've been seeing some of this, and I'm really interested in it. And people have said it when I started coming up with this idea, and I recently saw a post on social media. People talking about almost building like a fantasy style railroads.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying cartoon, right? I'm not saying, cartoony and that's
sure, but something that doesn't exist. So
right.
It's becoming less about rivet counting and a little more of artistic licensing, where people are just doing more of what they want to.
Right. And I think that's because there's an advancement in diorama building. And another thing I've talked about is there's lots of urban dioramas out there. One of the people that follow Dirt Spot just was in an art show where he put in his scale models. Wayman Humphrey just did a scale model show.
Yeah.
That wasn't a scale model show. It was an art show.
Yeah.
These things are happening all the time now. There's people out there selling scale model things that are signed, and they're selling for a lot of money. So if you take these kind of unique dioramas and you do somewhat port those over to model railroading, all of a sudden there's opportunities out there that whether it, look at the tabletop fantasy companies, tabletop world. Yeah. That stuff's amazing. Well, it's all very static. It's all very static. How do you go to the next level and put some animation into that? Well, the natural progression would be, let's figure out a way to add some kind of railroad, even though it's not necessarily, maybe it's the 1500s, but maybe, it's maybe steampunky or something like that. And there's more and more and more people starting to do that. And I have a friend of mine, Shane Olsen, he's an old, he worked for Disney, and he found out about Dave Meek's stuff. And Shane is more of a caricature guy, so he is a little bit more cartoony, but he worked on the Disney Infinity game series, and he found out about Dave and doing the Disney stuff and was blown away. He said, I want to do that, but he does digital drawings, so he could draw something in ZBrush, 3D print it. So he wants to do like a Porter locomotive that's kind of balloony, a little bit more. He wants to do actual caricature type stuff, but it's still model railroading. There's so many little fun assets.
I think for the average person, I think a good way to maybe advance is to start by just changing the color of the kit. Rather than doing what's on the box, and look at your past models maybe and think, okay, what colors worked? What did I really like that I did in the past? And just take those colors and apply it to your new model.
I think it's on the Home Depot website. They definitely have an app, right? You when you do your colors, you have a natural eye. You just know what works, right? Yeah. But if somebody says, well, I want to make maybe the main color of this building, bright red, whatever, right? You can actually go onto this app, and there's a number of apps like this, and you could select your color, and it'll give you a palette of colors that work. So it's almost like you use it for painting your house. Well, here's the main field color of your house. Now here's some really cool ideas for trim colors. Right. So even if you don't know how to figure out what colors would go in that category, which are complementary, or whether they're whether they work with each other or whatnot, there's ways that you can go online or download apps where you don't have to necessarily be concerned about, it's not going to look good, because you can just say what your main color is, or what your trim color is, and it's going to show you, okay, use these colors and it'll look great, right? And it's as simple as that.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think there's things like that now that can help modelers now advance. I mean, with everything that's digital, when I was growing up, when you were growing, everything was either on a video, and prior to probably 82 or so, it was all magazines or books. Right? So you had to go search it up. Well, now, and maybe that's why we're seeing more of a proliferation of different types of modeling, because you could just go on the computer or on your phone, look something up, and you go, oh, wow, that's cool. I don't have to go to the library to search it up, or I don't have to have a subscription to a magazine. It's just there. And so that could certainly be one of the reasons why.
Well, I think for you and I, we both almost put together a kit and wanted to be unrecognizable.
Oh, I certainly do. I certainly do. I mean, and I don't build nearly the amount of kits you do. I do. I mean, I really enjoy the kits that are out there. But even as I'm building this layout, I want to make stuff that's just funky. And there's not kits for that. I just want to make stuff that maybe is eye-catching or something.
Well, and it's so funny. I know that when I first started building Craftsman kits, I wanted to make it exactly like the picture on the box, because that's why I bought it, right?
Of course, yeah.
So then I progressed and I started changing the colors.
Right.
And then I started adding, maybe two kits together.
Yep.
Doing some kit bashing.
Yep.
And then, I found that, to put two buildings together, they don't quite go together the way I want. So now I need to scratch build something that goes in between that connects the two.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So now I'm getting more into scratch building, and it's just, for me, that's the progression that's the road I'm taking.
I probably would say that's probably a natural progression for most modelers.
Uh-huh.
However, and I've said this before and I've gotten flack for it, the kits now with 3D printing and laser printing are so good. I mean, the stuff that Foscale's doing and other manufacturers, it's so well done.
Yeah.
So easy to put together. And I'm not, and I'm going to preface this, I'm not saying it's a shake the box. I did say that before. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's not board by board. You don't have to do a ton of measuring. Everything's clean. You don't have to sand all your wood, things like that you used to have to do. So when you put it together, it tends to be faster. So
it's easier now to put together a kit and have it turn out exactly like the picture on the box.
Right. Well,
you had to have some skill. I mean,
it
took a lot more work to make it look like that picture on the box.
Exactly. And what I think it allows us to do, and maybe this is why we see more weathering and things like that, is it allows us to concentrate more on your colorization, your detail, your weathering, and the natural progression of that would be to do things like, sag roofs, all the little pop-up boards, throughout the bottoms of the walls, all that kind of stuff. That before you were so concentrated on getting the building, by the time you got it done, you're like, oh, great. I don't want to do anything else. This looks really good. I got it to where I want it. Now you can kind of put them together and so I really think that as things advance, and they're going to, I mean, we're going to see in the future, we're going to see complete 3D printed buildings. You're going to be able to find 3D printed kits that are plastic kits, but yet have character, right? Mm-hmm. Because before you'd buy a plastic kit and everything had to be perfectly straight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Because of injection molding, everything's flat. You can't have undercuts, et cetera, et cetera. It's got to be able to pop out of the mold.
Yeah.
With 3D printing, that isn't the case. You can print sagging roofs. You can print popped out clapboards.
We're seeing it with the role playing, like Dungeons and Dragons, the buildings.
They're amazing.
A lot of character in those.
A lot of character, and that is the natural progression that's going to lead to more character in model railroading. Once again, I'm not saying caricature, which is cool too, but more character because not everything we start out with has to be perfectly straight. Craftsman kits lend themselves to that because you're building it yourself. They're made out of wood. You can bend things. You can cut things. But now plastic or 3D printed resin. And once again, when I'm talking about 3D printing, I'm not talking about the filament printing. I'm talking about resin prints, which are much, much, much cleaner, extremely high detailed. You look at Mini Prints, the company Mini Prints, and the little animals and birds. And I mean, you're getting down to the detail of like the veins and the feathers and stuff like that. It's just unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, stuff, you look at what's being printed right now, and it is light years beyond what any of the, even like Woodland Scenics, Prizer, even the Prizer figures, which were always the pinnacle of figures, the 3D printers are printing better detail.
Yeah. Yep.
And the problem is these other companies, because you can't print mass, you can't mass print. You can, but there's a lot of effort into it. So smaller companies like all the companies that do the Craftsman kits, like a Foz or something, they're going to be able to print because they don't have to do tens of thousands of copies.
Sure.
Maybe they do 1,000 but they're going to be able to print stuff that is much better quality so they're able to be more nimble, work faster than these big like Woodland Scenics and these guys that are still printing the same stuff they printed in 1978.
But the problem is now you have to paint those figures.
Well, you do. Yeah, you do. But, that's a whole hobby in itself.
You know it.
There's people that just love doing that.
Yes.
I mean, that's one thing I like is I love sitting in with my visor on and being very close to what I'm painting, and that you're in your own little world, right?
Yeah.
So those people that are painting those figures, they love it, and but yeah.
I am so thankful, though, that for both of us, that we grew up in a time where there wasn't all this advancement. Yeah, so we were using craft paints, pastel chalks, but now we've learned so much from that, and we have such an appreciation for like all the ammo products that are available.
Right. That and what I really think is cool about things like the ammo products, right? Their advancement in figuring out new methods. They figured out in the past few years more new techniques and new products that we had in the past 20, 30 years, which is unbelievable. Now, admittedly, some of these products, they've kind of taken techniques that a lot of modelers have been using, and they've kind of packaged them so they're more accessible and easier for modelers to just buy right off the shelf. Sure. Like oil brushers and oil paint, you would buy separate oil paints, and now you can buy oil brushers. But things like shaders, acrylic shaders, acrylic washes now, and it's just it seems like the growth is exponential as to what when they started out. A lot of the stuff they had, they were other manufacturers have made them enamel washes and whatnot, but now you're able to do so many things with acrylics that you weren't able to do with acrylics before. And for the environment and whatnot, everybody's trying to get away from using enamels, and how Floquill's gone, and all that. You can get the techniques you get from enamels is amazing, but Model Masters is gone. Testers, Model Masters, that's all gone. But now all these companies are moving to acrylics and coming up with the same products that you can get the same look from, but they're now water-based. And that advancement has happened really, really, really fast.
It really has. But I think that it's important to point out that you have to learn to, what's the saying? You have to learn to crawl before you can run.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
A lot of times I'll get someone that will say, oh, I bought the rust wash and I brushed it on and it just turned bright orange.
Right.
Well, so you're not using it properly, first off.
Right.
And you need to back up. First, do your research. Find out how rust naturally forms on objects.
Of course. Yep. Exactly.
Do a Google search on rusted items.
What were the 3 words the artists always say? Reference.
Yes.
Right. So,
yes. Yeah. And I think that we were in a time where we had to use craft paint and pastel chalks and try to make it look like realistic rust. Well, now we have these products that you can do it effortlessly, but you still have to know the basics of how rust forms.
Well, sure.
And then you have to learn how to use the products properly. You don't just open the jar, take a brush, and paint it directly onto the model. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a learning curve that you have to go through with these products. And it's not just in using the products, but it's doing research to know what you're trying to achieve with the product.
Well, I wonder, and this is going back to, I my guess would be, okay, for instance, with ammo products. I think people that aren't used to weathering products, and that's really what ammo is all about. It's weathering products. Okay.
Yes.
There are paints, but there's all these additional weathering products. I think, and it's totally fine. This is a natural, it's totally natural to think that those products, those weathering products, are paints, right? They are not paints.
Yeah.
They are to be used in a certain method to go over top of paints, to be used as a wash, to be thinned out, to be used as a filter, to impart richness of color.
A lot of the products, you almost need an odorless thinner, which ammo sells, but you can't just use the straight product out of the jar.
No, and there's such a huge difference between on the enamel-based products or their oil-based products. When you put any of those products on top of a pre-painted surface, and they're not paints, so they're made to be on top of pre-painted surfaces, and you mix that thinner, or you wash things out and you thin them and you streak them, you'll see that it's not a paint. You'll see the variation in color where most of these become at least somewhat transparent, where you're seeing an underlying base color under it. And we've talked about this before, layer upon layer upon layer. You need to add layers, and these are adding layers because nothing you see is one solid color unless it's a sign that's brand new or it's printed. Even I'm looking at a house across the street right now. It's 2 years old, but there are slight variations because of the way the sun's hitting it, because of the stucco texture. There's slight variations in the color of the house, right? That's what we're trying to replicate.
Yeah.
You could paint that house all one color, and in a scale model, it might look okay, but if you zoom into it with your camera, it's going to have a really flat, and almost a dead look to it. So that's why we're putting these washes. We do oil spotting or whatever on with certain techniques. Now, one thing a lot of people say is, well, I buy these products, but they don't come with directions. Right. And that's why you have your YouTube channel, right? Jason Jensen Trains, and you do that type of work on your YouTube channel. Ammo, every time they come out with a new product, MIG or somebody will do a video on how to use those products properly. And so it's almost like an encyclopedia of, I bought this brand new product. For instance, I got a product not too long ago, and it was called Washable. It was in the little acrylic bottle, but it was called Washable Light Rust, right? Washable Rust. What the heck does that mean, washable rust? Well, it means exactly what, not if I get it in like washable magic markers, where if I get it on my clothes, I can wash it out.
Right.
I can paint it on something and use water or thinner and actually use it as a wash and wash it over top of a surface. So I think, well, obviously this show, we're sponsored by Ammo. We get to use a lot of the new products, and we certainly appreciate that. But I think what we're trying to do is go from that level of just painting or mixing paints and putting paints on a model to going to using weathering products to add depth, right? To add richness.
There's nothing wrong, I think, with craft paints and pastels and learning that
not at all
first, and then advancing to ammo stuff.
Sure. I love using the pan pastels. Right. There's certain colors in pan pastels that you can get some really good looking wood, old wood characteristics with, and I'll mix those with the ammo products or with alcohols or like the Vetero alcohol, series of great stuff. So there's always use for everything, anywhere from your Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Joann Fabrics craft paint all the way to the most expensive, oils. You can use all those. But what using the weathering products does is it allows you to take things a step further without having to reinvent techniques.
Yeah.
Because there's, face it, we all do a lot of experimenting with our techniques when we're trying to go beyond just paint. And the cool thing about weathering products is that they are already experimented upon. So there's already ways to get a lot of the looks you want.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, and we're slowly seeing a change in it, a lot of this stuff was developed in the military modeling world, right? So a lot of the stuff was always geared towards steel plastic kits. They're supposed to be steel armor, things like that. And we're seeing now more for like wood buildings and concretes. They've always had paints for concretes, but now there's like concrete. I can't reach it, but pre-mixed concrete, pre-mixed asphalt. That looks fantastic when it comes out of the jar.
It's so nice that stuff is available, and I don't think you certainly don't need to go out and buy it all at once, but you can just slowly start to add that to your inventory. I just bought my first set of digital calipers.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
After all these years.
I was laying that track, and I had to have some. We use them all the time at work.
Yeah.
But with the track, you got to be within fractions of a millimeter to be engaged.
And I would say probably 6 months before that, I'd finally broke down and bought one of the choppers that has the arm. Yep.
Have one hanging up right there on the wall.
And, a year ago, I probably got my first HO scale ruler. I mean, so you just slowly start to add these things, but I did okay without them before, but now it's so much better. It's so much easier having those tools.
Well,
at my reach.
Yeah. I mean, if you're scratch building, definitely a scale rule. Now, generally, most of what I do when I'm building, I look at it and go, does that look good? Okay. Is that walkway wide enough? It looks like it's a scale like 4 feet wide. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to build a car model here. I'm not trying to build a tank.
Yep.
I'm not trying to be exactly dead on realistic. I'm trying to make it look good, pleasing to my eye, right? Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. And I know that's what you're doing too. Yep. We're not making architectural models that have to be dead on to scale.
Yeah.
Not at all. We want to have fun with it. I don't want to be tied down to that. If I was tied down to everything being perfect and exact all the time, it would be a job. Yeah. And that'd be a fun job, but it'd be a job. And I don't want this hobby to be a job. I want this hobby to be fun. Model railroading is fun, right? But it is when you're scratch building, definitely a scale rule. Calipers help immensely, especially when you're handling turnouts.
It just makes things go a little bit easier and a little bit faster. Right, it's like so many people have asked me recently about the dry brush paints from
the Dioramas. Paints? Yeah.
And I love them for the simple fact that it's a much thicker paint than your normal acrylic. It's very thick.
Yep.
So it doesn't take as long to load the brush. You can just load it, wipe it on the edge of the bottle or wipe it on a paper towel and just start instantly dry brushing. It's pretty quick.
So with the Dio paints, now we used to, I would get Stencil Paints, and it was similar. The Dio paints tend to lend themselves more to weathering type colors.
Yeah.
Whereas Stencil Paints were, people were doing, back in the late 90s when they were doing stencils around the top of their, rooms in their house or whatever, right? Yeah. They worked similarly, but they were a little bit heavier. It's almost, a little bit more, I want to say textured, almost a little bit more grainy. Whereas the ammo Dio paints are really fine, but they're heavy.
Yeah.
So,
And the colors are great because I think in the past, so many people have just done a white, just put a highlight. Well, there's all these colors now. There's rust. It's great. And, on my workbench, I have a designated spot where those go. So when it comes time to dry brush, I just reach for the color I want, open it, quick dry brush, and put it back. It just speeds things up. Sure, you can take acrylic paint and dry brush with acrylic paints. People have been doing it for years.
Yep.
But this just speeds things up and makes it easier for you.
Well, I think that it's kind of funny because I watched a video where Mick Jimenez was talking about the Dio paints. And he says, "Oh, these are dry brushing paints," and he made fun of the fact dry brushing, right? Like it's an old technique, and it kind of is, right? Yeah. It was before there was all these washes and things to bring down the fields, darken things up, washes that are around edges and whatnot. You could dry brush and you'd pop your highs up really quick, so you'd get the different levels on your models. And then military modelers kind of started walking away from that because realistically, for the most part, when people dry brush, they do it way too heavy, too heavy. You should not see brush marks.
No.
In dry brushing. And I look at my old models and everything had brush marks on it. And
the softer the brush, the better.
Yes.
You just want the softest brush you can possibly find.
It's almost like an airbrush, right? It's so light,
soft.
Such a soft touch, and you're barely popping those highs. I mean, barely.
Yes.
Right? We used to say that, dry brushing, I just remember Malcolm talking on his weathering video. He was saying, Alan Keller said something about, you're dry brushing. And he said, yeah, I dry brush everything with white to pop it out. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what everybody did back then.
Oh, yeah.
But even if you're dry brushing and you're making artificial sun highlights, you're not seeing white, right? You're seeing like a warmer color. So that's when you start hearing about George would use like an antique white, right, to dry brush with because it wasn't so stark, right?
But I've dry brushed with a dark brown on like a 55-gallon drum or, like a big, and what it does is it creates like a chipped paint or scratches. It highlights it and it gives it a rust look, but I'm dry brushing with a very dark brown.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are things that you could do that's dry brushing that wouldn't normally, like I say, dry brushing has pretty much always been highlights, right? You don't have to do it for highlights.
No.
Honestly, you don't see a lot of that anymore. It looks cool when you first see it. You go, wow, that's cool. All the detail popped out. But then if you actually stare at it in pictures, it looks like it's dry brushed. It really does. So I guess... So it was kind of funny. He was talking about, here we have these dry brush paints and it's kind of old school technique, but I want to show you how you can use dry brushing. It's exactly like what you said.
Yeah.
Using dry brush of color that's not a bright color, but could be a darker color to add more layers, not to create highlights necessarily.
Yeah.
But to add more layers. There are some there's some really cool techniques though. Like if you're going to paint in artificial light, you want something to look like it's lighting up the scene. Like here on this side of my face, it's brighter than this side because I have more shadow over here. Well, there's painting techniques where you dry brush lighter and lighter and lighter colors in less and less and less of an area. And you're actually starting in the valleys and you're going higher and higher and higher and you're doing light. And it's really, really cool. So there's some really cool techniques you can do with dry brushing. In there, once again, there's nothing wrong with dry brushing to do highlights. It just depends on, like a lot of my models I take outside, right, to photograph.
Yep.
If my stuff was dry brushed and I'd do that, it wouldn't look right because I would be forcing those highlights.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people do it because you're inside. And if your lighting isn't all that great, you are trying to force those natural highlights. So these are things that you learn as you progress.
Oh yeah.
And now
I've been using the dry brushing paints too as a fader. So I want a metal sign to look like it's been sun faded.
There you go.
Lightly dry brush it with a lighter color than what the sign is.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be white, a light blue, light yellow, and it gives it a faded look.
Yep. I think that technique would work really well. I've been playing around with this red. I do a technique where, and this is somewhat you see on miniatures, where let's say you're going to paint, this isn't a great example, but let's say you're going to paint a face, right? And like I just said, instead of dry brushing, you would mix your paints. You'd add some white to your base, and you put a lighter color here, and then a lighter color here, and then as you go higher, you're adding more and more lighter colors, right? Yeah. You could do that on a wood building where you want to look like paint has been bleached, where you add a little bit of white to your base color, and you just keep making the areas a little smaller and smaller and smaller. But that's easy to get really heavy-handed, right?
Oh, sure.
And that's something I've been practicing because it's a difficult technique, especially on things like wood that have grain, without it looking very forced. So I've been working on that, and I still haven't even come close to being good at it. But like you're saying with the dry brush, a dry brush of a lighter color, without brush streaks, right?
Yes.
A dry brush of like a blue sign with a dry brush of a light blue. And look at signs that fade. They don't fade evenly, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have signs where maybe some of the blue paint's still darker.
Yep.
And some of the other paint that maybe is higher up or more in the sun or whatever, that's going to be lighter. So if you dry brush and you have a really soft brush and you take most of that dry brushing paint out, which is easy to do with the Dio paints, you can get that kind of, I don't want to say mottled effect, but it's not evenly faded. You know, it's more natural.
Yep.
And I think that's another cool thing you can do with those Dio paints, with the dry brushing. Yeah.
It's so fun to experiment with the ammo stuff. Like I've been doing a dust to make it look dusty, to take the odorless thinner with the pigments.
Yep.
And brush it on, but you have to let it completely dry, and then after it dries, then it looks dusty.
I use there's a pigment called, see if this is one of them. It's Europe Earth.
Okay.
Which is a ammo pigment, Europe Earth, and there's another one. It's called, I think it's Light Dust or something like that. Very light colors.
Yep.
These, if you put those on you build a structure, right? And you have your glazing in your window. When you mix, I'll use like an odorless thinner. You could use water too, depending on the technique you want to get. When you put your pigment on with that, it's going to be very dark. So like you said, you have to make sure it dries all the way.
Yes.
Because it's going to lighten up drastically. But then you can take and kind of almost like wipe out, like in the center of a pane of a window, you can wipe out the center. Like they've kind of wiped them off, but they didn't really care. So the dust kind of stayed around the edges. Some really cool techniques that you can do with dust, with pigments. And the pigments that they make specifically lend themselves for doing things like dusts, like dust buildup on anything. But I personally like using it for windows. I think it's really cool. It makes some old dusty looking windows. So
yeah,
and there's just so many products. I've been using one thing that's not ammo that I've been using. I know you use also, is I've been using a lot of Prismacolor colored pencils.
Oh yeah.
But I've been using either the ammo odorless enamel thinner or alcohol. And with those Prismacolors, you just brush, you draw, and you can sharpen those pencils super sharp and draw whatever detail you want in, and then just run your brush lightly over that detail.
Yeah.
It'll totally fade out that pencil and get rid of that pencil line. And it just gives you could do really cool things like little bits of rust streaks or cracks. Or, it's so cool.
I've been using markers too lately, and I've been showing it in my videos where I'll rust a sign, and then in the past I used to always paint the edges of the paper so that it doesn't look like paper. Well, now I take a really dark brown marker and just quick go over the edges of it, and it looks like old rust on there.
Yeah, but talk about advancing.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, you probably would have used a Sharpie, right?
Yep.
Black Sharpie, right?
Black Sharpie for everything.
Super high contrast black Sharpie. Yeah. But when you start looking at these things, you're going to notice that and you said this before, you almost never see pure black.
No.
Outside, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. You're going to see almost anything that's black is going to have some kind of fading or weathering or dust. Roads. People like making the roads asphalt pretty dark. You never see black asphalt. Even when they first lay it, the sun setting it, it's not black.
Well, you have to keep in mind when you're looking at a layout, if there's something that really is true black, you're like hundreds of feet away. Like in HO scale, you're so far away from that black that it's going to look lighter. It's going to get gray.
It has to look lighter. Has to.
Yeah.
So without a doubt. I mean, that is just something you learn through just progression in time.
Sure. Yep.
And better products. Allowing us to advance faster.
Yep.
Right. But, and we've said this before, there's nobody's saying that things out there, you can't use you can't use craft paint. You can't use, watercolors are amazing.
Yep. I'll tell you an ammo product that I absolutely love that I've been using lately.
Okay.
Okay. So for years I put acetate in all of my windows, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And I've used plastic testers model glue, right? Or super glue, and put little tiny drops and then put your acetate on the window.
Right.
Okay. Now Ammo sells this liquid cement. And it comes with a really super fine brush.
Right.
And you just put the acetate on the back of the window, and you take that brush and dip it into liquid glue.
Right.
And then go around the edges, and man, it just seals it. It bonds it together.
And it bonds it well.
It bonds it well, yes.
Yep. And that's the thing.
You don't see any discoloration of the acetate. It's awesome.
CA, if you use CA, which you can use thin CA, but if you have any of the oils of your fingers on the CA or on the acetate, all of a sudden your fingerprints are going to show up as white marks, right? So you had to be really, really careful with your acetate when you cut it. But yeah, that glue is so thin.
Yeah.
With using the capillary action, it pulls itself up into the mullions and the frames and locks itself onto the windows.
It doesn't spread for whatever reason. It doesn't spread all over the acetate. It only goes where it's in contact with the plastic window.
Yep. That's
I'll never use anything else. I love it now.
And it bonds, which is really cool.
Yes.
And that, I think that's there, sometimes, been many times where I've used CA on windows and I think that it goes where it's supposed to, but it doesn't bond. So if I'm moving it around, the acetate might pop off. I said, what the heck? I just glued that on there. Why is it, but with the cement, the glue, it, basically melts, lightly melts the plastic and actually forms a physical bond between the two. It's just not a material. So it's almost like you could see the same thing with like acetone plastics. this stuff works a little bit better, but it's actually creating that physical bond between the two, not a glue that's in between holding them. It's actually making the two pieces physically mate together.
Yeah.
And they actually become one part. So that's a really, really cool product. It's very cool.
No, I love
super
it.
fine, super small brush, really easy to use.
But I think there's something to be said for not having that in the past and learning how to successfully put acetate on the back of titchy windows without that glue showing. Learning that skill, and then now you have so much more respect for this product.
Without a doubt. And I think that is almost like, and I'm thinking here, it's almost like anything in any type of fabrication, making things that the old timers always go, well, back in the day, we used to have to do it this way. Well, you know what? It's really good to learn how to do it like they did it back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So you understand the progression of where things have come from. And you not only do you understand the progression, you can have much more appreciation of what was done back in the day. It gives you more knowledge of how things maybe should be, or maybe you can take some of your new ideas and merge them with the older ideas of how things should be.
You still need to learn the basics first.
It's all basics. It's all basics. I'm thinking of specifically of, let's say, carpentry, fine carpentry. There's a lot of things that you can do with machines now that you don't need to know all the hand stuff. But without that fundamental, there's, you need those fundamentals. So that you need to know how it is to glue acetate on the back of titchy windows with CA or whatever. You need to know that. You don't have to do it all the time at all, but it's good to have those basic building blocks.
Exactly.
Imagine how John Allen would have been doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Sure.
So,
it's like someone learning how to play the guitar. You could go out and spend $5,000, $10,000 on equipment easily, have the best. You're not going to be any better a guitar player. You still got to learn. So the best thing is to buy a cheap guitar at a secondhand store, learn how to restring it, learn how to tune it, learn how to play the basic chords on it. And then when you become more comfortable with it, then advance.
Do you play guitar?
I did a little bit.
Oh, you did?
I used to, yeah.
I think
I was more of a drum
guy. I tried to be I did have a little guitar when I was small and tried to take some lessons. It was horrible. And same thing with drums. Was even worse with the drums.
Oh.
Yeah, you can't keep a beat to save my life. I wish I could. I've always wanted to, but I have no idea. Same thing with singing. Wow.
Oh God,
weird.
I cannot sing.
I can't do anything. Well, we sung that on that one podcast, the pirate song.
Right.
But yeah, I think, but every time I make something, in a way, I kind of look and go, I'm getting worse. I need to try harder because I want to get better. So I in a way like that challenge because I don't want to get to where, this is nothing.
Pushing yourself.
Why do it if it's so easy? Why even do it?
Exactly.
I love that challenge. I think that's really cool. I like the challenge of how I had to try to fit this layout behind me in this really small space. I like that challenge. Now, when I actually have to physically deal with the challenge, like lay track in a 14-inch high space with bench work that's 5 feet in the air, I hate it. But at the same time, I like the challenge of trying to figure it out, and that is also part of kind of growing as a model builder. At least in our type of model building.
I agree. I don't ever want to just get comfortable where I'm just doing the same thing over and over. I mean, a perfect example, a couple of videos that I did, a couple of videos back, I did a restaurant, and most everyone was saying that it was going to be a seafood restaurant.
Right.
And I put these little airplanes on it and made it the Flying Ace Bar and Grill.
No, it's awesome.
And, it's just because I could have easily done a seafood restaurant.
Well, yeah.
I've got signs in my computer for it. It would have been no problem, but I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And I've also found, and at least for me, this is true, that when I put that kind of twist on something, that product that I make actually comes out better.
Yes.
than if I would have just made a seafood restaurant.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, I could do another one of the Ace Flyer type restaurants, but then the next one I do probably won't come out as good as that one that I did because I was challenging myself to do.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, because I'm thinking more about it or whatnot, but I definitely find that's the case. And so, like, I always enjoy trying to mix things up a little bit. If I keep doing the same type of building,
well, and it takes time. It takes time to get there, right? I mean, because years ago, I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to. I don't want to try something new and then like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? You
got to be comfortable enough to be able to do the techniques, right?
To build that confidence takes time.
But at the same time, I've said this before, you don't want to be so comfortable where you think it's just a breeze. You got to put that twist. You got to make it harder on yourself in some way. Give yourself a new material to use. An odd location on your layout where there's this weird shape, and I want to put a building in there, but that funky space, you might make the coolest building you've ever made when you start thinking about it, how you're going to fit it in that space,
Yeah, exactly.
That's on the layout right now. Once I put those buildings in there that I've already built, I'm going to go, okay, I want to jam something in this spot. I want to make it hard to figure out, but I like that puzzle of figuring it out.
Oh, and definitely.
I think that's where we get some of our best work.
Oh,
I really do. But you do have to be comfortable enough to know the techniques, right?
You're getting to that point now where you're putting in all your rock work, where now you can add a building that's hanging off the side of a cliff, and you can put supports under it that go into the rocks. And so you're doing it forces you to do more custom pieces. Right,
exactly. And that's what I want. I love doing that. I don't want to build straight up stuff. I have this part on here where it's a clay brick retaining wall. Well, it's not a retaining wall, folks. It's the bottom of a building. It looks like a retaining wall, but it's the bottom of a building. There's going to be a building there that's right on the waterfront. So
cool.
Yeah, but that's all through, initially I thought, oh, it's going to be a retaining wall, and I like the looks of it. And I thought, it'd be really cool if that was a building, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be some kind of building where they dumped the chum from the fish into the water. I already have one of those, but they had to have a lot of those. So they had to get rid of all the scrap from the fish. It's a little island, so they had to put that stuff somewhere. So they just dumped it back in the ocean. So that's
it's so cool for me to see how you've progressed, because I really followed you when you were building. I forget the name of it. Sorry,
I don't remember either.
Your big layout. You're building your big layout.
The Wiscasset, Trevino, and Western is what that was called.
Yes.
I had to have a traditional railroad name, I guess. So.
And to see how this is so much more extreme. It's like that, but it's advanced and extreme.
You know what? This is in the same world.
Yeah.
Figure that out. They take the fish from Bergen Island, and they used to ship it to Trevino, and that's where it got distributed across the world, right?
Yeah.
Now I have that 0130 diorama that I did, which is called the Dirt Spot.7, right? That's from like the 1880s. First Spot.7 was a little mining company. Well, slowly grew into this conglomerate, this huge corporation that did fishing and mining and all kinds of commodities. And so that is also tied into this layout. So they all live in the same universe.
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
That is.
So I have a sunken paddle wheeler that I made for this one that's going to be under the water. And it's called the Little Trevino Queen, named after Trevino.
Okay.
The Trevino city, so that was actually originally shipped from Trevino, which was Massachusetts, to
very
this place.
Cool.
But Massachusetts on a different planet.
That layout, it seemed like you maybe followed certain rules where you don't really follow those rules anymore.
I don't.
Now it's just that's just your progression.
Here's the thing. I look at what I'm doing right now, and that is, it's still following some rules. I don't like the fact that it's following rules. I see some modeling and some things that could be modeled that I think I'm going to put on here that are way outside the scope of what you're seeing current model railroaders do.
Okay.
If this was a time era on planet Earth, which it's not, it's another dimension somewhere, right? It would be in the 50s, right? Well, right now, all these buildings, these people that live on this island were supposedly abandoned there in the 30s. So construction went from the early 20s to the 30s. So the buildings are all kind of stuck in this 30s kind of era, even though it's the 50s. Mm-hmm. But I want to add some stuff where they did a little bit more modern construction, which I don't know how they would do it yet. I don't have that part of the story figured out yet. But I look at some of these big, massive Asian cities with their older slums, like Hong Kong and things like that, where these just story upon story stacked.
Right.
Or Brazil with the favelas, all this stuff stacked up. I want to do that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like they took all these scraps of whatever and they built their shanties on top of these buildings. Mm-hmm. That's where I want to go with it.
Yeah,
not great. Anything you ever see in model railroading.
Yeah.
So I want to do that. I got to get these buildings planted, but on top of these, because I don't want to have the traditional kind of model railroad look. Mm-hmm. I want to do it. I want to go outside, and to use the cliche, out of the box. I want to go way outside the box.
Yep.
I don't want to go cartoon outside of the box, but I want to make it like it could have been somewhere else. You know? So, that's where supposedly, as of this moment, I'm heading with it.
It's like believable fantasy, if that makes sense, right?
yeah. It's not fantasy like your European fantasy or your Lord of the Rings or your anything cartoony. It's you're exactly right. It's believable fantasy. Yeah. It's what's his name? Stalinhag. Boy, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here. Anyway, he's got the artwork where it's like the 80s, but he's got all these wires hanging and all that kind of stuff where it looks like it's the 80s, but it's got this mix of this weird future kind of stuff. I really love that. That's not where I'm going with this, but it's that same kind of idea.
Cool.
Yeah. So
awesome.
Anyway, I think we've been at it now for nearly an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
So,
jeez.
Yeah, I mean...
it doesn't seem like it, but...
No, I mean, I hope we've talked about our thoughts of progression in model railroading and how we feel that we've progressed, right? I know that what you're doing when you take a photograph, because you're composing every scene, everything is so well meshed. There is not a layout out there that's as well put together and as composed as your railroad is.
Thank you.
And that's including the Franklin South Manchester. He's an awesome model builder. No doubt about it. He's one of the best. But he's not putting that kind of consideration into the composition of where everything is.
Yeah.
I mean, in his mind he is, but if there's such a thing as a photogenic layout, your layout is the photogenic layout, no doubt about it.
And it just has taken hours and weeks and months and years to get to that stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I'm on my third layout, because I looked at my other layouts, and after a while I'm like, I can't photograph this, or I can't add to this. It's not working the way I want it to work in my mind. So I just needed to scrap it and start over.
Well, that's like this layout. That's the challenge with this layout. It's so small and it's so shallow. It is a challenge to be able to shoot it in a way. You know, I finally found some cool lights.
Good.
I had to. So I'm going to go off track here and tell a little bit of story, but this is part of model railroading. I bought all these track lights, right? And first I mounted them and they hung in the scene too much. So I changed how they're mounted, but they're super, super, super warm. They're like a 2700 Kelvin, right? Really, really yellow, warm light.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yep.
I want a cooler light, more of a daylight, right? So these are all Lithonia track lights from Lowe's, right?
Yep.
They don't have Lithonia track lights that are daylight balanced. They're all warm.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have replacement LEDs for these things. So I took apart the can, right? And I found that there's this little, what they call a Cobb LED. It's a little flat LED on the inside of it. And I had no information about where to get these, except there was a little serial number on the back with a little QR code. So I took a picture of the QR code and it gave me the full serial number. I searched the serial number and found out these things were made by a company called Bridgelux. Now these are new lights, I just bought them, but these LEDs are not produced anymore. So I had to search, they're 36 volts too. So I had to search for a replacement but I found them. Wow. 12.5 millimeters by 12.5 millimeters, 36 volt, that are 6,000 Kelvin, or I'm sorry, 5,000 Kelvin, more of a daylight, neutral light.
Okay.
Right? They're not expensive, so I bought 10 of them. And now I'm going to replace all these guys. I bought enough, so if I buy more track lights. But, it's a kind of effort. If you want to step up, I don't want to, these sections were, 2 sections here, and they're $120 a piece. I don't want to throw them away, right? I don't want to trash them. I want to use them. So I found these darn little things, and now I'll have lights that I can. So that little thing will help out photography much more, because once I have a layout, I can't take these buildings outside and shoot the whole layout, right? So,
well, hopefully everyone listening advances however they feel they need to advance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or progress however they need to progress. But as long as you're progressing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's important.
Well, and I think it all does something, for us as, just in life, that we want to get better at what we do. We don't want to stay stagnant in a hobby, but that's what this hobby, the moon, beyond the moon is the limit. We can keep getting better and better and better and better and better. I can't wait till I see a layout that's the whole layout is the quality of some of the best military modelers.
Oh gosh, I know.
It'll blow my mind. There's nothing like that yet.
Yeah.
Not even close. There will be. There will be someday. But it's going to take people wanting that desire, wanting to get better, wanting to take the effort into getting better. And it'll be fantastic when that happens. I can't wait.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
So, I think unless you have anything else to say, I think this has been the show, season 2, episode 1 of our monthly podcast. Now, today is we're at the end of the month, so I'm guessing that. Let's see, when are we going to post? We will post. Now, you're already listening to this, so you already know that we're posting. But this will probably be posted on, I guess, the first Friday of the month.
Okay.
So I'll have to edit it, but we'll be, let's see, the first Friday of every month. You'll have something to look forward to in the new month.
Sweet.
Will be the day that we will release our monthly podcast. So that's cool. I'm excited about it. That's going to be cool. Yeah, it's going to be really, really cool. So, guys, I would say absolutely, hey, if you go to Jason Jensen Trains on YouTube, Facebook, you go to Dirt Spot on Facebook, James A. Powell on YouTube, I think that you should send in ideas for shows. I mean, we have ideas.
Definitely. Yeah.
But if you want to see something, you want to talk about something, probably not DCC, but maybe Dead Rail with DCC. If you want to talk about something, that'd be great. We'd love to talk about it, and we want to hear what you guys want to hear about. But I would say thank you for joining in. Thank you for Ammo for helping us out and helping us improve and get better.
Yep.
And thank you guys for listening. And we will all talk to you next month, right? So I will say goodbye, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you guys. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.